I think he'd become a franchise-style quarterback. I do. I'm not going to say it's going to happen overnight. Well, I just look at the quarterbacks that are here right now, not just Dwayne, but with Alex Smith potentially coming back, Case Keenum, Colt McCoy. I mean, these are guys that have played quality football, including Dwayne. Dwayne has played some pretty good football, but we're in a good situation with the 3 veteran guys. Nothing is solid. Everything is fluid as far as our roster is concerned. We've got, we've got an evaluation process we've gone through. We know what we'd like to do, and we're going to go forward with those decisions. We've done an evaluation on Dwayne. We feel pretty good about who he is. He's done a nice job here. He played, especially at the end of the season, a lot. So we've got good tape to evaluate, and we saw some pretty good growth. But, we have to react what happens in front of us. We don't have the first pick, Cincinnati does. So based on that, we have to decide the direction we want to head from there.
Well, we're going to start with our GM, Mike Tannenbaum, because you've made decisions like this, or at least been in this position. If you're the Washington Redskins, Mike, do you pass on the best player on the board, or do you consider drafting a quarterback?
You strongly consider taking a quarterback. The verb that Ron Rivera is using right now in the building is we're going to scour every possibility to get the Washington Redskins better. And at the end of the day, if they make the determination, candidly, that a lot of people around the league feel that a healthy Tua Tagovailoa is a better football player for Dwayne Haskins for the next 10 years, then you go ahead and you draft Tua. And when you look around the league, what's interesting to me, it started a year ago with Arizona when they drafted Josh Rosen, and then they moved on because they got Kyle Murray. There's a number of young quarterbacks, Daniel Jones in New York, Dwayne Haskins, and also Baker Mayfield in Cleveland. When you're inherited in this league and you're not drafted by a certain head coach, everything is up for grabs. So I think this Tua debate is real, and it makes a lot of sense to me.
Victor, Tua aside for just a minute, let's start with what we do know, and that's right now Dwayne Haskins is the Redskins quarterback. Have you seen enough, or what else would you need to see from him to make you think, all right, I can build my future around this guy?
Well, I think he's shown flashes that he could be a franchise-style quarterback, but I just think I don't think he's played enough games to show the consistency of being that franchise guy, of understanding what it takes to be that franchise guy, both on and off the field. Now, obviously, Ron Rivera's coming in. This isn't a guy that he brought in there. He's obviously a first-year coach with the Washington Redskins. So I know he wants, in his first tenure, he wants to bring in guys that he can trust, that he can bring in there and be confident that they'll go out there and perform. And most importantly, they'll be his guys, right? Guys that he can vouch for in that meeting room when they say, hey, what's up with him? So I think Ron Rivera's looking at this like, hey, there's some guys out there in college and in this draft that we're looking at, and all positions are open.
First thing that comes to mind for me, for everybody who follows football, whether you're a Redskins fan or not, is buckle up. We've got 50 days until the NFL draft. 50 days. So we've got all kinds of stories that might be in this family of ideas, right? Hey, the Redskins on paper have a young developmental quarterback. Could they potentially be a Tua Tagovailoa suitor? Should they just draft Chase Young, this prodigious defensive end talent who fits a need, who's probably the best player in the draft, who happens to, by the way, be from the D.C. area? A lot of things of this nature. We'll talk about it with the Lions at pick 3 and the Dolphins at pick 5 and, heck, the Chargers at pick 6. So get ready for stories like this. But let's just sort of deal in what we know. Ron Rivera, as Mike mentioned, was not the person responsible for drafting Dwayne Haskins. And this offseason, actually really might have been just the end of the regular season, Ron Rivera became arguably the most coveted head coaching candidate available. The Redskins worked expediently to make sure they could hire him because they thought he'd get a job elsewhere, including perhaps the Giants with Dave Gettleman, his former GM in Carolina. The Redskins hired Ron Rivera and handed him the keys to the car. Whatever he wants to do, and I'm not saying everything just will be done flippantly, but if Ron Rivera is convinced on Tua and not convinced on Dwayne Haskins, then sure, it's possible. At the same time, I think there is enough to see at the end of last season from Dwayne Haskins that you could convince yourself, something with a little bit of work under Scott Turner's tutelage, maybe we can get Dwayne Haskins playing consistently like last year. And oh, by the way, you think Jack Del Rio, our former colleague here, thought about the possibility of drafting Chase Young when he was in negotiation with Ron about taking that job? I'm not saying it's a done deal, but don't you think he'd say to him, like...
Listen, I think Jack Del Rio is like, knock, 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 I'll just stay in your office until the draft.
That's
Mike,
right. I had a good thing going here with that.
Yeah, no, there's no question. Let me ask you this, Mike, and we know for a fact that Coach Rivera had conversations with ownership before he took this job, and you would believe that there is some ownership that he's allowed to take in this, but how much influence will he have in this draft, in your opinion?
It sounds like he'll have the ultimate influence, and I think there's a lot of health to that in terms of I've been in that situation before where the head coach is the final decision maker, because really what his job is to find what he's looking for at every position and then have the personnel department execute that vision and serve the head coach. So I think you're going to get a lot more consistency in the decision making in terms of what front seven players look like, what receivers look like, and then ultimately he has to sit there and take the long, sober view and say, for the Washington Redskins, are we better off with, let's just say, Dwayne Haskins and this great pass rusher, or do we go all in on Tua for the next 10 years? It's not unlike what Arizona had to do a year ago and say, are we better off with Josh Rosen and Nick Bosa, or are we going to flush out Rosen and we're going to go ahead and take Kyler Murray?
I think the biggest thing with Ron Rivera is that, especially after speaking with him during his time in Carolina during a visit there, he wants to put a team together that's going to go out there and compete. And I think whatever that takes, whatever, if we have to sacrifice Dwayne Haskins or he won't be our guy, whatever the case may be, he wants to put a team out there that can compete and play at a high level and play hard. And whatever that takes, Ron Rivera's going to do it.
And Vic, that's an interesting point, though. Because if you're a scout for the Redskins, you know that the grade should reflect that maybe we'll take a little less talent for a little bit higher of a motor. And that's okay. And that's healthy because at least everyone's speaking the same language.
Exactly.
Again, the Redskins pick number 2 just behind the Cincinnati Bengals, who are expected to take Joe Burrow. The Jacksonville Jaguars have agreed to trade cornerback A.J. Bouye to the Denver Broncos in exchange for a 4th-round pick in the draft. This is according to our Adam Schefter yesterday. The trade cannot be processed until the new league year begins on March 18th, but nevertheless, it's in place. Former Jaguars cornerback Jalen Ramsey weighed in via Twitter. Free all my dogs. Laugh out loud. There is no love lost between Ramsey and the Jags. And speaking of the dogs, here they are. Just 2 years ago, the Jags were a quarter away from a trip to the Super Bowl. But now their defense looks completely different from that game. Their star corners, Jalen Ramsey and Bouye, moving on. Yannick Ngakoue has publicly said he doesn't want to play for the Jags. And look, players get disgruntled. It's part of the process. Having said that, a lot of smoke here, Mike, I think anyway, for there not to be some sort of fire. So from a front office perspective, what's not gone right here in Jacksonville?
Yeah, and of all the things that you mentioned, Yannick Ngakoue coming out publicly and saying he doesn't want to be there.
Getting ahead of the curve there.
Yeah, that really stings. There's a big problem there. And look, it may or may not have been Tom Coughlin, but if I'm Doug Marrone, this is an opportunity to fix what's going on with Yannick Ngakoue and address that whole list that we just looked at. I would go fly and see him. I would bring my yellow pad. I would ask open-ended questions and say, what is wrong with the Jaguars? And candidly, I would do that with 5 to 10 veteran players that you respect, people like yourself, Victor, when you played. Be a great listener. And then that's my action plan for the offseason. We have to fix this. Whether it was Tom Coughlin or not, that's irrelevant. That's ancient history. What do we have to do? Because you practice and play on grass. It should be a destination, and nobody wants to be there. We have to find out why and then go fix it.
But you have to be willing to listen. I'm not saying they are or they aren't, but you have to be able to self-assess and say, hey, maybe we have played a part in this. Because there are players in that locker room, Victor, who still want to compete and win games. How do you manage that?
Yeah, it's tough, especially for a head coach, and especially if I'm one of the younger guys in the locker room, right? And I see all these veteran players leaving and not wanting to be there, and I'm sitting there maybe in my second year like, wait, what's going on here? So I think Doug Marrone, being the coach that he is, the straight shooter that he is, has to have those conversations, not just with those veteran guys that he needs to sit down with, but all the guys on the team. First day of OTAs or first day of off-season program, you have a team meeting and you talk to the entire team and the players and let them know what the plan is for this year, how you want them to compete, what level of attitude that they need to bring to the game each and every day, and see where that takes you, because right now it's a little in flux. And if I'm at home and I play for the Jacksonville Jaguars, I have a lot of